Hey everybody, welcome to another Bald Movie. Today we are talking about Inception that was released on July 16th, 2010. This makes it its 10th anniversary. It also has the distinction of being, I think, the first, or if not, one of the top one or two movie reviews we ever did on Bald Move back when we only had one show called Blue Yonder. This was on episode 21, the Dreamcast. And the Inception Dreamcast, and I will link that in the show notes. In fact, our first idea was we were just going to re-release that into the movie feed, and then we listened to it and we realized it sounded just terrible.
Yeah,
the audio quality is terrible. It's not necessarily representative of what we are today. And you know what? It'd been, I don't know, 5 or 6 years since I've seen this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of eager to revisit it. This, of course, is written and directed by Christopher Nolan. It's scored by Hans Zimmer, like an instant classic, legendary score. And it stars just a ton of famous people. Leonardo Dicaprio. I don't think I need to walk through his filmography. Ken Watanabe, who, of course, has appeared in Godzilla, Letters from Iwo Jima, Memories of Geisha, Batman Begins, The Last Samurai. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who got a start on Third Rock from the Sun. Also has been in Batman, Dark Knight Rises, Looper, 500 Days of Summer. Marion Cotillard.
I'm not French. I don't know.
I have a trouble with the French. Who also was in the Dark Knight Rises, Contagion, that we just reviewed recently. Ellen Page, star of the various X-Men movies, Juno, Hard Rock, and of course, The Last of Us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not true. That's a lie. Common misconception. Tom Hardy, who I just recently saw in Capone, who is also in Venom, The Revenant, Mad Max Fury Road, also The Dark Knight Rises, Bronson, Rock and Rolla, Cillian Murphy from Batman Begins, Peaky Blinders, Sunshine, 28 Days Later, Tom Berenger, who starred in Platoon, Sniper, The Substitute, The Big Chill, and finally, Michael Caine.
Oh, how could you miss the link to last week's podcast? He was also in Born on the 4th of July.
Who?
Tom Berenger.
Oh, you're right. He was the recruit because he starred in Platoon.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michael Caine, he's been in everything. The Italian Job.
Has he ever not been a star? Like just a massive star?
I think we watched his first starring role in Zulu many years ago as a commissioned podcast. But he's been in every one of Nolan's films, I believe, with the exception of Memento.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But everything since was The Dark Knight? No, Prestige. He wasn't even in Prestige, which I think predates The Dark Knight. But yeah. And Children of Men. We just saw him in about a month ago in Children of Men. I like this movie a lot. This movie really caught my imagination when it first came out. I got way into the theories and, kind of like the different ways to interpret this film. And you can hear all that on the Blue Yonder 21. I found it held up like a champ. 10 years later, I had just forgotten enough about the movie to make this a really entertaining rewatch, but was familiar enough to kind of like, be anticipating all the things I knew was coming. How was your rewatch, Jim?
I found that it held up remarkably well. This is maybe only the third time I've seen it. I think I saw it those 2 times before we reviewed it for the Inception Dreamcast, and then I don't think I've seen it since. Certainly not in its entirety. So coming back to it was like, okay, my memory is a little fuzzy on some of these things, but I remember most of it. And I certainly remember, the ending, which I think is what most people remember of this movie, if they remember anything. Because that's, the big question after it came out was, is he in the dream world or is he in reality again?
Right.
And it seems like there was a lot of supporting evidence for both sides. And so people were arguing furiously on the internet. And yeah, I was super impressed with this viewing of it. The first 2 times I was kind of like, the first time I was a lot like Robert Fisher is in the movie, where Leonardo DiCaprio is just saying a bunch of shit and pushing him along through this plan, and he's just kind of going along with it for the ride, right? Second time I was more like Ariadne, who's like there to learn the systems and like figure out how all this works, and then sort of get inside of Cobb's head, and just sort of figure him out. And then this third time, I was really invested in like the emotional and construction of the film.
Yeah. And I think because I think I've seen it 5 or 6 times, because I remember watching it 3 times. And I saw it again like almost immediately after we recorded a podcast, because there was a couple things I just wanted to nail down, some things that you guys were asserting and some things I got wrong. And I watched it another time for fun like a year later when the Blu-ray came out, and kind of indulged in the special features. And then I saw it like 4 or 5 years ago. I watched the riff tracks version, and it actively kind of pissed me off, because I have a problem sometimes when I really enjoy a movie, especially it's been a while, and I watch the riff tracks thing is going to be fun. I'm like, well, shit, these guys making fun of it are interfering with my enjoyment of the thing. But since then I haven't seen it, and I think it helps that like this movie relies on a lot more practical effects than people probably suspect.
Yeah.
Like there are obviously CGI, like the city of, what was it? What city in Paris? Or is it Paris, where the city's folding up on itself? That did not literally happen.
Yeah.
But there's a couple stunning effects, like when Ellen Page swings those big mirror panels shut on that, like, walkway. Like, that's a really cheap effect anyone can do it with 2 mirrors, but it fucking looks amazing when you got mirrors that good, that big, on 35 millimeter. Incidentally, I guess this was the last film to be nominated for an Oscar that was shot on film up until La La Land.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, everything since has been digital, which, 2010, it makes a lot of sense. Like that's like really been adopted. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. This movie is exciting. It's thought provoking. It does an amazingly efficient world building. And as long as you go along with the 2 or 3 leaps that the movie asks you to kind of invest in its world, it's also pretty airtight.
Yeah.
There's a few quibbles that I'll have that we can discuss if we want to towards the end, but I really enjoy it. And I think that I think this is something you and I agree with, that Leonardo DiCaprio is just a monster actor.
Yeah.
And he's particularly good at investing emotion into characters that, like I'm thinking there's two scenes that stand out. One in Shutter Island and one in this, where he reacts to something that is almost unimaginable, like the death of your children, the death of your wife, in a particular gruesome way. And it's just, who the hell knows what that looks like? And then you see Leonardo DiCaprio do it, and I'm like, oh yes, it looks like that.
Right.
Because it's not like you really emotionally connect with, you're told things about him, that he lost his wife, that, he hasn't seen his children for a while, that he's on the run, but you don't really emotionally connect it, because this movie is a little bit more cerebral than that. You need that scene where he reacts to these tragic events to kind of like, really ground this movie emotionally. And he gets like 5 seconds to do it, and he crushes it.
Yeah, you absolutely need that scene. I don't want to take much away from Nolan here on the emotional angle of this movie, because I think there's the way that the emotional side and the plot side come together, and are Christopher Nolan makes like clockwork movies. He's got this impeccably plotted film that is, maybe there's a hole or two, but they're nowhere near as big as traditional or typical films.
Especially one this convoluted.
Right.
Literally.
It's an extremely complex plot dealing with multiple timelines and rules that he's established, and he works very neatly within. And then that always connects over to the emotional side of it. Like, even when I think of things like Inception, or sorry, not Inception. What's the other I in? The other Noel in movie? Interstellar.
Okay.
Yeah, when I think of movies like Interstellar, he's doing the same things there, right? He's weaving that emotion into an already really intricate, hard to tell story. And the way that like the emotion connects with the plot here just makes so much sense. The scenes of Maul in invading the dreams that they're in and trying to sabotage them, and that being Cobb's subconscious and his guilt over Maul, and the way that all resolves by the end of the film. It's also just perfectly timed, perfectly paced. and so easily understandable. I can't think of any other filmmaker who tries to do things as wild as Christopher Nolan and just makes them so easy to follow.
Yeah, like even we were talking about like he fucks with time or your perception with it in almost every film.
Yeah.
With the exception of the Dark Knight trilogy, even Dunkirk, because I remember you said that like a month or two ago when we were discussing something unrelated, and I'm like, what the fuck? Dunkirk is straightforward. I'm like, no, it's not. It's like 3 different nested timelines that all come together in the last act. I'm like, oh shit, you're right, and that's
Yeah.
uh Inception, it literally is about that, and like in to some extent the Prestige and Memento and all that, but Dunkirk, he just does it for the fuck of it. Like it's like it's certainly a technique because it, even though these events are taking place at vastly different time scales, he's synchronized them in terms of tension.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things where it's like it is kind of a stunt, and I do kind of think he does it just to challenge himself. He must, because I'm sure he knows how to tell a conventional story. Look at the Dark Knight trilogy.
Right.
But it must amuse him or to challenge himself in a way, and it's not just for challenge sake. It always serves some part of the plot. It either increases the tension, it puts you, like in the case of Memento, which I think still is my favorite movie of his, it puts you effortlessly into a very unique mental scape. Like, if you haven't seen Memento, it's about a man who has short-term memory loss. He can't form new short-term memories. And it's like I said, it's like a stunt, but also they're linchpins of the movie as well.
Right.
And
right. It's a stunt that he then builds an airtight movie around.
Yeah, and I think there's very few movies that are that tricksy that hold up to multiple viewings. Like I can think of like M. Night Shyamalan's Sixth Sense is one of those where it's like, oh fuck, am I sure I saw what I saw? And you watch it and it's like, and in fact that's where I multiple watches of Inception just crystallize what I think of the movie, and how is as tricky as it is, it plays very, very straight.
I was amazed on subsequent viewings after the first how straightforward the film actually is. Because the first time I came out, my head was reeling. I was like, who is where at any given moment? Second and third times, I'm like, oh, they're at this level. They go to this level. They get kicked out to that level. It's all right there on the page. There's no confusion really about any of it.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of, I even contemporaneously, there was a lot of like infographics showing like the different levels and where you hit limbo, and the different timelines and the depth of the characters, or which depth they're at any particular time. It's one of those things that seems a lot more confusing than it is. Now there is still, I think, room for interpretation, and ultimately what you feel. I do think, and I said this on the Dreamcast, I do think there's a right answer, or right answer being the answer that I think Nolan had when he was shooting it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of different ways you can interpret this, not just in terms of like whether it's real or not, but there's like, a very popular interpretation that I don't think can be dismissed through evidence, is that this is an allegory of making a film. Like this shared dreaming and like multiple people coming together, and how like Sato's the producer, and Cobb's the director, and Ariadne is the artistic design, etc., etc. Who's Cillian Murphy play?
Robert Fisher.
Yeah, Bobby Fischer, the chess star. He's the audience, like, and that all tracks through. And I read in an interview that like Nolan was surprised that people had that interpretation, but he said it makes sense because I've only really worked with, like, I wanted to model an efficient creative team working together, and the only experience I have with that is in a film crew. So like it's I did kind of base these roles around that because it's what I knew. But I think it's really cool that there's multiple ways to look at this, and still to this day you can make arguments for and against the reality of the film.
Absolutely. That ambiguity was intentional. Nolan talks about how intentional that was, and how you're left to kind of figure out where you stand on the ending of this film. He's not going to try and push you too far in one direction. But it's interesting that you brought up, how his process of constructing this film, kind of how maybe he thought about it as like a film set or a film production. maybe in not such specific terms, but it's also got so many roots in a heist film, right? Like it essentially
Sure.
is a heist film, but it's modified with all of these extras, like the timey-wimey plot, the dream world. There's so many things that he kind of bolted onto the heist that it doesn't feel just like a regular heist movie. And I
Sure.
really appreciated that. But you can go through it and you can say, okay, you got your standard heist tropes of all these
Mm-hmm.
characters, these archetypes. Dom or Cobb's the ringleader. You've got the architect who's like the plan person. I don't know what to call these characters, but like
Yeah.
you've got everybody in their role functioning as a heist team, and it just so happens that lines up, but it had to be intentional, right? You start out with
Oh
that
yeah,
core.
like yeah, and the fact that you're going around the globe to assemble the team because
Uh-huh.
you know this is a special job that you can't just get done with their own, so you got to go and recruit it's Ocean's 11. You got to get the Chinese acrobat, you got to get the face man, you got to get the confidence man, you got to get the
And they don't they
guy
never
with the technology and explosives, and this is
yeah
all that except for it's dream shit. You got to get a guy who is a good forger, who can assume identities in subconscious. You have to
yeah
get a good drug guy because you're going to have to suspend these guys in unconsciousness for a long period of time. And you're right. You even got the scene where they're kind of laying out the plan
hmm
and they're drawing schematics of what they're invading, and it tracks. Yeah, it tracks 1-to-1.
yeah it definitely does. And I like the way that they introduce all these characters. It doesn't feel like, oh well, we got to get the gang together. It's always like, oh well, this plot point of why we need Ellen Page's Ariadne character to be the architect bleeds over from plot to character, right? Because Dom is
Mhm.
having trouble, or is it Dom? Is Dom Cobb? Is that his name? Why do I
It's
keep...
Dom Cobb. Yeah,
Okay, I keep wanting to call him Dob.
Dob.
Dob. Yeah. So Dom, is out of commission as the architect, right? Normally he would do this, but
Mhm.
we find out that Mal is keeping him from being able to create because she would know the maze and she would be, but it's all his
Yeah.
subconscious, right? It's like
He's got an emotional handicap that's keeping him from
absolutely,
performing.
yeah. And it makes perfect sense to tie the plot and the characters together in that way. And that's what I really appreciate about this movie on third watch is just the intricacy of all the pieces working together, which is why I called it a clockwork movie.
Right. Before we get too far into spoilers, should I do, because it's a 10-year-old movie, should I do a brief synopsis for people who this is their first time through?
Yeah, and then maybe I'll run down some of the awards that it won.
Okay. So, Inception is a movie set in the near future after military research and using dreams as a way to enter subconscious and extract information against a target's will becomes, if not commonplace, at least existing in the world. Leonardo Dicaprio plays Dom, a leader of a very talented team of extractors that professionally steal information in this manner for hire. However, a powerful businessman has a different proposal. Instead of stealing information from someone's mind, he wants them to plant an idea in the air of a rival corporation's head to force him to dissolve his father's company, gaining, obviously, competitive advantage. I'm sure Bezos and Musk lay awake at night dreaming of this technology existing. Much of the movie takes place on multiple levels of dream space where personal identity, the laws of physics, and even death itself are much more conceptual and fluid than they are in real space or real life. And that's essentially the movie's hook. If I said anything more, it would probably be massive spoilers.
There's a really cool hallway scene.
There's a really cool hallway scene, and they filmed it all aboard the Vomit Comet. No, that's not true. Because this movie made a lot of money and garnished quite a bit of awards. What was its impact in 2010?
Yeah, so it was the number 6 most popular film, according to the box office in 2010, and it was beat by the likes of Avatar, which came out the year
Jesus.
before.
Yeah, it's still making money.
Right, very, very late in the year, like December 18th or something. And then Toy Story 3, which was the number 1 movie actually that year.
Damn, beating because the Pandora or the Avatar split across the year. Okay.
Yeah, had its big box office weekends in 29. That's how you say that.
2029.
The I guess the surprising one was that Alice in Wonderland was actually a more popular film than this.
What the fuck? For real?
Yeah.
Speaking of a movie that's made zero cultural impact.
This thing had a budget of 160 million, made 830 million worldwide, so pretty big success.
You know, it's funny because did you know that this movie had no second unit? Christopher Nolan was behind the camera with a cinematographer for every fucking shot in this movie, which is like a very indie filmmaker kind of move.
Yeah.
You don't usually see that in a $160 million movie.
No.
That's almost, 2.5 hours long. Like, that's like Peter Jackson had, like, I think 3 or 4 camera units running around New Zealand all the time filming stuff. So
yeah,
I thought that was an interesting piece of trivia, that it's like, he kind of went back to his indie roots, but with a blockbuster Batman budget.
and the marketing budget on this thing was enormous. It was 100 million. And I think back to that time, were there many movies getting $100 million worth of marketing budget? Probably just the biggest
alone?
Ones.
Yeah.
Like Avatar probably did.
Right.
Yeah, but I was kind of blown away. And you almost didn't even need that kind of budget, although maybe I feel that way because they had the budget. But I remember seeing the posters, seeing the shot of the city folding in on itself, and just going, okay, I'm seeing that day one. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
I didn't need to be sold on this movie.
Plus, this movie, I remember the trailer had that, like, omnipresent, and it's a prominent soundtrack, and
kind of started that trend, right?
Yeah, like, this movie had its cultural impact was very similar, I think, to The Matrix, in that, like, it popularized a bunch of different trends, like the effect, and it just almost everybody saw this movie. It was something that, like, it's a cultural touchstone in that way. Now, there's been a little backlash against it because it's popular, and Nolan has continued to be popular, and I think he's like like a lot of true film fans are mildly offensive that he's kind of almost got this Kubrickian stature among, and like, but he makes mass market kind of movies that make a ton of money, and that's like
somehow bad,
a hairpin that's hard for some people to turn, like, I don't know, like, it's possible that he's overrated as a director, but the man makes really complicated films competently, and they make a shit ton of money.
Yeah, I appreciate the work of a good craftsperson. And Nolan is certainly that. Even if he's not the most art, he's no David Lynch. I'll give you that. But, like,
right, but he's also no Michael Bay.
Lynch's work.
He's also not Michael Bay. I mean, if you want to watch a man piss away $200 million, go see a Bay film.
Go see Transformers 2, sure.
Yeah, or 4 or 5, whatever the fuck they're in now.
I stopped at
Transception.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the blah, because it did become ubiquitous after that, and this movie actually won most of its awards for its soundtrack, or for its sound, let's say. So it won 4 Oscars in the 83rd Academy Awards, 1 for best cinematography, 1 for best sound editing, best sound mixing, and best visual effects. So you got, like, the hard sciences of filmmaking is what it's winning for. It's not winning for the art stuff, and I think that's fair. This movie was technologically kind of, or visually kind of mind-blowing, auditorially mind-blowing when it came out. I think it deserved those. That
$100 million budget, like, it much like The Matrix, and actually, funny enough, 10 years later, much like Tenet itself, very mysterious. Like, no one really knew what the hell this movie was about. You saw, like, it's like I remember in The Matrix, like, how the fuck is all this different disparate things linked together in some unified, and, like, here you see this city folding on itself, and you see in the trailer Joseph Gordon-Levitt is, like, dancing in zero G in a hallway, and there's, like, an automatic weapons fire, but, like, almost like magic powers, and, like, what the shit is going on? Like, what possible narrative hook could you assemble all these things on? And now you got Nolan with Tenet, and the tragedy of this is I don't think anyone's going to see it. I like, if Tenet comes out in the big box movie theater, I ain't going. So its only chance to land is probably on direct to video. And if I'm Christopher Nolan, I understand being bummed out. I guess he's one of the big drivers of, like, no, we are going to release this in the theater. But damn, like, it's a shame, but, like, I do think that but it's been a minute since I've seen a trailer for a movie like Inception, like The Matrix. It's kind of like, Jesus, this looks cool as hell, but what the hell is it about? And Tenet's our next shot at it.
Yeah, what was that? What was that one movie about the guy who goes to the sanitarium and gets like the worms or the slugs or eels or whatever in the tank, and he's like,
yeah, I remember. That's another one that we were excited for the Matrix potential, and it
super
didn't live up to
excited.
it.
Don't bother with that one. The other four that it lost, the other four categories: Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay. It lost both of those to The King's Speech, which I've never seen. I'm sure it's great. Best Art Direction, it lost to Alice in Wonderland, which, okay, I can kind of understand that. Best Original Score, this is interesting because it won so many sound editing and sound mixing categories. Best Original Score, it lost to The Social Network, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Those guys have been doing amazing work in the last 10 years.
But I can't hum a single like they did some badass work on The Watchmen too. And I would immediately recognize if I heard it, but I couldn't hum you a single bar. Like even like the really kick-ass Angela Abar Sister Night shit. Like I know the feeling and the bass that hits you, but I couldn't tell you like what the melody is. It's very industrial atmospheric. Whereas Inception, it's definitely got a recognizable theme, and like the Bois was such like it infected movie trailers for I think there's still pretty prominent movie trailers, but like for a good 3 years afterwards, every fucking action or science fiction or any kind of drama had to have one of those big dissolve cut to a spectacular special effects scene of Bois, punctuating each one.
And I mean, it's been parodied and it changed the soundscape of film.
Well, where do we want to begin? Because I've got a couple of things I think just like that Nolan does really well.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
I think one of the things that Nolan does really well is selling the idea of competency where the audience doesn't really have a good judge of it. There's a couple things like that there's shorthand for, if you're talking about an intelligence officer in a movie, if he can, like you say, what do you know about General Vladimir Fucker? Well, General Vladimir Fucker graduated magna cum laude from the first Soviet class of 1993 with a bronze Soviet star. Like, if you just rattle off a bunch of extraneous, like, okay, well, he knows his shit, right?
Yeah.
A soldier field stripping his weapon in 5 seconds, like, tells you. But, like, how the fuck do you sell competency as a dream extractor? But I think he does a really good job, and a lot of this comes through the lens of Ariadne, because she is the audience surrogate. She is the one who has no idea about how this shit works, and they're explaining to it. And just him like putting her through the maze interview, like it sells her the idea, like what does a proficient maze architect look like? And like in 30 seconds they sell you on it. Something that's adaptive, quick on your feet. And something the audience can follow along with. And I just noticed that like time and time again, he's effortless at showing like Eames is an extremely good forger. Ariadne's a good architect. Yusuf is a good drug cocktail guy.
Arthur's a semi-competent research guy.
Yeah, researcher / kind of like the manager of the group. And he sells this stuff. And again, you have no idea what the fuck it looks like to be like, how would you sell a competent dentist, It's like you have no experience in the craft, and he just does it in 30 seconds. It's kind of like really amazing. Again,
it's one of the laugh out loud scenes for me in this movie is when they do the thinking outside of the box, a literal thinking outside of the box moment. It's when he's giving her the cop's giving Ariadne the test to construct this maze in a minute or in 2 minutes that I can't solve in a minute, and she's like drawing on the boxes all square. She flips over the notepad to the blank side where it doesn't have the graph, the graphing charts or paper, and draws a circular one. I'm like, oh, that's a literal thinking outside the box moment.
Yeah,
and I couldn't help but laugh.
This thing outside the box is flipping the script. It's he's just, like I said, really good at it. Now I noticed some people think that like Ariadne kind of drags down the movie, but like without her, you'd be fucking lost.
Drags down the movie. Yeah, I
just
don't
like there's
see
so
it.
much.
Like,
She is saddled with so much of the movie's exposition.
mm-hmm.
And that's true. That's absolutely true.
Cobb. Yeah.
But I think that like you don't feel it. It feels very natural because they've got, it is, I guess it's interesting. What did they ever explain in the movie why they can't use just some other architect? Why they have to go to like Cobb's dad to recruit an architectural student or something like that?
Well, I mean, what they're doing is not strictly legal. And so I guess they would need somebody they trust. And, Cobb trusts his dad and his dad trusts her.
I also get the idea this exfiltration is kind of like shady anyway. This is not like a white hat security team. This is more, and I guess that probably those types of people do exist in this world. Like the people that trained Fisher in weaponizing his mind probably are white hat exfiltrators or whatever. But it seems like all the extractors in this world are kind of, you got to understand it, like Danny Ocean.
Sure.
Maybe they're not actively wanted by Interpol, but they probably should be 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because like what he goes down for, what he's maybe that's not true, because what he's wanted for is the death of his wife, not that he is a renowned subconscious thief.
Yeah.
But it does, like, how do you do this job legally? Because you're extracting information against people's will, drugging them without their knowledge, invading their deepest subconscious layers. Like, it's gotta be illegal.
I think he says somewhere along the line, like, there weren't many legitimate opportunities. Like he might have helped the military develop this tech.
Right. I guess there's that too.
Yeah. And then the thing with his wife came up, and then he couldn't find opportunities that weren't illegal, and so he just does the illegal ones.
The government can sanction all kinds of stuff up until mass murder and have it be legal.
Yeah, it's totally legal if the government tells you. The other thing about Ariadne, okay, so I just don't believe that she's too much in this movie. I think, look, 75% of this movie is getting us up to speed so that the last 25% hits. And I think, like, okay, if you have a structural problem with this film, you don't want to sit through 75% of world building and exposition.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. I get it.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't think it's a fault of this film, personally. Yeah. I really, really enjoyed learning about this world, learning the rules that it's working within, learning how those rules can change given different circumstances. And if you didn't have a character like Ariadne, who would Cobb tell these rules to?
It'd seem really ridiculous. Like, hey, I know we've been doing this for 10 years, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but just make sure we're all on the same page. What happens? How does a kick work? And the thing was also like, I think Nolan had to spend a lot of time, because it's not like these rules are just, it's not like Harry Potter where it's like, oh, here's a wand lore and it's 9.5 inches, made out of yew wood, it's got a unicorn string. It's like, he's basing on a lot of things that we have common experiences. Like, how many people have been kicked out of a sleep by the sensation of falling?
Yeah.
Oh,
I love it.
The idea that like your dream, one of the signatures of a dream is there's no like beginning. Like you don't remember you going to sleep, lose it. Like you kind of start in the middle of things. You never question that reality. And the idea of like, oh, if someone is in there and helped you question it, it would attract your subconscious to defend. Like, that stuff is really fucking cool. The fact that you shouldn't dream real places because you might lose the connection between what's real and what's not.
The way that the dream world and the real world blur together, in that, like, oh, there's a safe here, that's a safe place to put my thoughts that I don't want anyone to know about, right? Like,
it's and how and
cool.
the more powerful method of incepting an idea is to work with things that's from the person's own mind. Like, something I just noticed this time is when they hold a gun to Bobby Fischer's head and say, tell me the best opening of a chess game, and he just rattles off some number. That number had no meaning, but they continue to use it like at every level of the dream, like now it is the phone number that the girl gives him, which turns out is
The hotel room numbers.
or hotel room number. And then when he has to enter a code to his own mind, he has that number that he thinks is his own idea, even though it was just some random shit that he spewed out. Like all that shit really tracks, and it uses everything that we all know, experience about dreams, and just says, oh, what if there's a little bit of pseudoscience that kind of stitches this together, or these are like the keys you can use to hack into someone's subconscious, and it makes you feel smart because like, oh, I knew these things and I can see how they fit together, and bam, there you go.
Even down to the time dilation stuff, right? In a dream,
sure,
a second can go by in the real world and it feels like an eternity.
Yeah,
I love how it's all meshed together. There's other subconscious things they do in this movie, like when they try and pull the Mr. Clark gambit, I think is what it's called. On Robert Fisher to turn his own subconscious against him. Before that happens, they have in the real world Leonardo DiCaprio toast Cillian Murphy over his father, right? And so that puts that guy's face in his head. And so I think when he sees him in the dream world, he can go, oh, this is a dream because I know that guy in real life. And now he's showing up subconsciously in my dream. I just met him.
Part of my projections. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really brilliant when it comes to the way it uses dreams.
And the kind of dreamy architecture, like they illustrate the Penrose steps. Like I've definitely been in a situation where I've like one a recurring nightmare I have is I'm driving in my neighborhood and I can't quite turn into my driveway.
Oh no.
Like I get there and I'm like, oh God, well I guess I'll circle around, and like I feel like I can get stuck there for hours and it becomes genuinely stressful because for some reason I just can't make that turn. It's going to be dangerous. And like the idea that you can have this impossible architecture that looks right from from a certain perspective but not another, and they do some like that Penrose, every time they do the Penrose steps, it's a practical effect.
Yeah.
Like they do fixed perspective, and then it's like the Indiana Jones Last Crusade where it's like, he throws the pebbles onto the path and it looks invisible, but then the camera comes over and it's like, oh, it's all fucked up. That shit, and it's not a digital effect. It's something that they actually built, this weird, impossible architecture, and then got the camera angles and made it all work. Mm-hmm. It's really neat. It's really neat.
So we kind of talked about a little bit of the structure, but I want to talk about the aesthetics of this film because, it didn't win for the best artistry or whatever the hell it is that year, but there are some aesthetics that stand out to me. Like when I think of this movie, and I know it's a small portion of this movie, but I think of that warm wood aesthetic or those warm temperature colors in like Maul and Dom's house and in the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the aesthetics I think of, and the other is the snow level from I don't know why I associate it with like GoldenEye and James Bond movies. And
well, so I found this because I just watched On Her Majesty's Secret Service, that like weird non-Connery, non-Moore, Craig James Bond, the George Lazenby or whatever the hell it.
Okay.
That level is literally based on the climax of that movie. And Nolan confirmed it. Like, that's his favorite Bond, and he thought that was always like the coolest bad guy layer and the coolest of the Bond costumes. And like Tom Hardy is literally wearing James Bond's like uniform costume in this thing. Yeah. But it's iconic for sure.
What do you think about Tom Hardy in this movie? Like, because I don't know that I had ever seen him in anything before.
That's the thing. Like, I've seen him in so much since, but this is my first, like, this guy who, there's something very interesting, and like omnisexual about him. Like the fact that he's literally gender fluid in the dream world. I think he's playing gay or bisexual, or how the hell would you even know? And he's ridiculously attractive. He looks very good in the suit. He looked very good, comfortable, like hefting a grenade launcher and dispatching people, like, hostile dream projections. And I was like, man, sometimes you see a person in a movie, you think this guy is going to go on to bigger and better things. Sometimes they flame out, sometimes they don't. And then after I saw that, I kept on hearing like, oh man, you got to see him in Rock and Roll. And I'm like, oh, it's a Guy Ritchie film. Fuck yeah, I'll watch it. And he kind of plays a similar character in that film. And then I hear that he's, what is that, Bronson.
Mhm.
And he's nothing like any of those things in Bronson. He's this violent, homicidal maniac in prison in Bronson. And you see him like channel some of that energy and like you haven't seen the new Capone.
No, I
Which honestly, it's not. I don't think it's ultimately worth watching.
Okay.
But he is a fucking force of nature in this film, playing this like Al Capone in the last year of his life, where his brain's getting holes eaten in it by latent syphilis and all this other stuff. He just is. I don't know. He's like a buff Gary Oldman, because he can he can really inhabit so many different types of characters, but he also has this like insane physical presence that most traditional character actors, a guy built like Tom Hardy usually plays like Mad Max, and that's it. Like, he's just going to be action hero after
weird.
action hero after action hero, and he's had this like entire art house cinema career on top of all that stuff too. And he's just always rock solid, believable in everything he does.
I look at him in this movie. I wouldn't say he's built. I think that happened later.
Maybe I'm taking my Bane and Mad Max into it, but like I thought he was a substantial because I also know that in a year or two before this he was in Bronson, and he's fucking ripped and shredded in that movie too.
Right. I mean, maybe he's in good shape, but he doesn't seem overly. He doesn't seem much bulkier than any of the other characters who I know are not bulky. Like.
Mm-hmm.
Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm not sure he's ever worked out in his life.
Known atlas of a man, Leonardo DiCaprio and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Titans of flesh.
Anatomy references, yeah.
No.
I think Leo's most known for being a dad bod guy now, so.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
So stacking them up next to each other, he didn't look that much different from them, so maybe
Fair
it was
enough.
the suit, maybe it was the puffy snow
Put
gear.
everybody in a tux, and yeah.
But he definitely bulked up in subsequent films, and maybe bulked down for this if you're saying Bronson was before this and he was jacked.
We also,
but I've been impressed with his stuff. I was kind of surprised to find out he's British after he did that accent in this movie. I was like, oh, is that his real accent, or is that no? It's his real accent, I guess. Because everything I've seen him in since has been either he's having a mask strapped to his face and he's talking like
weird.
Yeah, I can't even describe it. Or he's doing a very, very passable American accent. So, yeah, I don't know. He's great. He's shot to stardom in the last 10 years.
Sure. I think there's a lot of great performances. We talked about Leonardo DiCaprio, and he has to be an everyman, but also kind of a superhero in this film, but also grounded emotionally in terms of his children and his relationship with his father, and especially his relationship with his ex-wife. And you can't talk about that without Marion Cotillard, because I don't think I'd ever seen her in a different film. I've seen her since then in a bunch of different things, like most recently Contagion. But man, she plays a real crazy bitch in this film, and it's really, really good and disturbing. And the idea, like you have to feel the horror of what Mal has done, and that he gets desperate, and this his wife has lost her sense of reality and limbo, and well-meaning he incepts the idea that this is not real, and he does it so well that it plagues her thoughts. Where she gets, and this is where a lot of the alternate, interpretations of the movie come from. The idea that real life can seem like a dream if you've been in limbo for a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
But those scenes of her, ranting and raving about her children, the plan that she has to make it seem like he's murdered her, so that he has to kill himself so they can get out of the thing and see their children again. But also she has to play someone that at some point that Leonardo DiCaprio would still believably be in love with and can really torment him. Yeah. And she's just really good. And again, with very little screen time, especially since you go through over half the movie without even realizing the true nature of her reality.
Mm-hmm.
The
believability of their relationship really is sold to me by Leonardo DiCaprio's performance, because I don't think the movie does much. The movie shows a couple of shots of them happy overlooking the city they built in the limbo. Like they don't do much. The heavy lifting is done by Leo selling how much he loves this woman, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you assume that, oh, they must have had a happy relationship at some point.
But just like, that moment where she jumps off the ledge and he,
Yeah.
like, in real time, fully, like, like the unreality, because, he's been through 50 years of limbo too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how unreal, but also how awfully, terribly real it is. Like, it's just, again, I don't know what it looks like to go through that, but I think it probably looks exactly like how he did it.
Okay, let me ask you this.
She's just really good at playing crazy. And also there's a moment where she's allowed to be genuinely frightening. Like when she first realizes Ellen Page is intruding in their little dream world. And she's almost like something out of the Overlook Hotel, a vengeful, restful spirit, the restless spirit that'll come and get you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those scenes are terrifying and she's fantastic in them. And then, scenes where like they're sitting at the table and she's just trying to make her case for, this isn't real. Come with me. And even though we know it's his subconscious he's talking to at that point, like you still feel the weight of those conversations, and she's great at that. So you brought up the idea that like Dom, whatever, he's real hard on those Cobbs, is trying to get her out of limbo, and they've been there for 50 years. Did anyone stop to ask the question why?
Why what?
Why is it important to get her out of limbo?
I don't know.
Because if you could live an entire lifetime of fulfilling, happy life with godlike powers in a dream world, why come back to the real world?
In the space of 4, it is interesting. Because I actually think one of the prime uses of this technology would just be to extend your perceived life.
Certainly,
like,
yeah.
You could take a 4-year university education and a shared dream experience. You could do it when you're 18 and you'd be done a month later.
Yeah,
you could have a graduate degree, you could have a medical degree, you could have a doctorate, postdoctorate degree.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually surprised that, like, they showed that, like, mostly it's just people being burnout. I thought it would be, like, rich, high-achieving college kids would be the ones seeking out Yusuf to, put me under. Yeah, so
Adderall.
I can. Yeah, it's like Adderall. It's like Adderall times a million.
Yeah. I know Kung Fu, right? Everybody can have their I know Kung Fu moment.
Yeah. Yeah, you can go get taught kung fu by an expert, and it takes you, that would be an insanely, like, a destinations. You just have like you're walking on the beach, and there's a little booth that's like, hey, learn how to surf in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
we're gonna take you 2 levels down, and you're gonna surf at our limbo dreamscape, and you're gonna come out, and you're gonna be ready to go day 1 of your vacation.
Yeah.
Like, that would be an insane use of this technology.
I would think so. And I also don't understand, like, if you're going to live 50 years in the limbo, you're going to experience a lifetime. Why are you so concerned about getting back out?
I think that's the biggest criticism, because, like, there is this idea that, like, limbo will make you crazy because the human, like, we evolved to slowly contextualize, like, I don't ever, like, when I think of myself in previous versions of me, like 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, I never think of myself as what I looked like then. I always think of, like, myself,
Yeah.
And, like, the idea that you would live this life, you'd be 80, 90 years old, and then you wake up and you, like, it's just an hour's gone by in your old life that you can, like, how do you remember, like, the minutia of your children's days, routines, or what was important to them when you've gone and had these godlike, but the idea that they've spent 50 years in that, like, you'd think the threshold of those effects would have already taken place.
Yeah, and you might as well live out the rest of your dream life as opposed to your real life. Get lost in limbo, if however long you can stay there, just stay there. I don't understand Dom's obsession with getting back to the real world, which is, the main driver for the emotional side of this movie.
I mean, I think you can, like, if like, one, it would have been interesting because, like, I think you can almost understand it as a selfish desire. Like, if if Dom has suddenly woken up to the idea that this is just a dream, like, suddenly, like, imagine if you, like, any dream that's even pleasant, like, once you realize it's a dream and it's not real, and there's, like, it's actively keeping you from getting back to your real life where you have children and family and things waiting for you, like, it's almost a selfish thing. Like, I've realized the reality of this nature, and now I need you to do it as well. But they don't really make that case.
Yeah, I guess if they had kids on the outside in the real world,
Yeah.
that could be a reason to go back.
And they did, but but those kids are still there. Like those kids,
Right.
that's like, this is just like, you're taking your kids to grandma, and then you go check into a hotel room and do like I don't know, an ounce of mushrooms with your wife.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can get in all kinds of crazy time dilation effects with that stuff and live alternate realities and things. But you know what? Your kids are still there. In the morning, you're going to wake up and be fine. You can go see them again.
Yeah, true.
But then again, like I said, I can't say what it feels like to be in limbo for 50 years and to wake up out of it.
Yeah.
I did think, like, speaking of the visual effects, like, there's so many things that, like when Mal and his wife are on the beach and they're actually building sandcastles, you can see those buildings erecting in real time. And when they demolish them, you can see them being flattened in the back. It just is like a subtle background detail that I thought was like really fucking cool. It gave you the idea of this, like, man, what if you're you're building sandcastles, but that act is also creating full scale castles in the background. It's a really, really neat piece of world building.
Yeah, they don't show a ton of it. It's
Yeah.
just enough to give you a vision of what you would expect to see, and lets you sort of run with it in your own mind.
Actually, I have a ton of like minor gripes from the film, or things I don't do. Do you want to do those like all in succession, or do you want to continue to talk about some things that the film did well?
Are they all like plot related? Because I feel like we're about to turn a corner into talking about the plot and the mechanics of the movie.
Yeah, I guess there's more of, I don't know. Like, here's one, and you tell me whether it fits in. It's somewhat unbelievable that Robert Fisher would get bumped from his private jet, which was a substantial vehicle, and then he gets placed on, the 747 and first class, and he has no entourage. He doesn't have a personal assistant. He doesn't have a bodyguard. It's just him and his rich billionaire mogul father's corpse flying. Nobody, and like, even like, maybe it's like, well, he can only get one first class ticket. His assistant is like, but his assistant's not going to come in and check on him. It's like they do. I think they explain how you can get in that situation. Sato buys the airline or whatever, but still, it's like, this guy just travels. It's like, I just bought the airline. I thought it'd be easier, but like that didn't really kind of make sense.
Okay, sure.
And then, the other one is more plot driven. Is they play fast and loose with the idea of what can kick you and what can't, and like, this drug protects, like, dulls all your senses. You can be slapped, you can be splashed with water, gunfire can go off by your head, not a problem, but a kick will still bring you out of it. There's all kinds of fucking kicks that are missed, like especially in the van level, where like they roll down an embankment. At no point like did that kick you out of sleep. The fact that when they hit in free fall, it's a plot point that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is experiencing free fall. Well, if your inner ear detects a drop, then the drop is detected, and they're like, oh, we missed that one. We can like, I get that the ones down below would be stuck there, but Joseph Gordon-Levitt should have woke up.
Yeah, it feels
and
like
immediately smashed into the water, which would have put them all in limbo.
It's like the visuals of how cool they wanted the shot to be, and the bleed over between the levels were at odds. Like, okay, you've got this rule about the kick, and if you experience a falling sensation, you're kicked out. But then you also want to show like how the effects of the level above you are affecting this dream level.
Yeah, and it's an amazing set piece, like that zero gravity shit with Joseph Gordon-Levitt in that, vertical hallway is, one of the signature moments of the film. It's like it's that, or the folding up city that I think people remember most from this movie. And I thought the stuff in watching them inside the van in super slow motion, where their like arms are all kind of flailing around, and like, I thought that was really, really cool, but it didn't make a lot of, and that's like the only thing I think about that. Like, everything else, like I thought, him rigging up the elevator to explode to generate artificial gravity, the fact that they blew up the entire base to drop everybody, like all that stuff really was well thought out. And I think there's a couple things where Nolan's like, you know what, fuck it, people are either going to go with this or they're not. Because I want my zero G scene, damn it.
And you got to give it to him. Most movies have a lot more holes like that.
Oh yeah,
a lot more of just paper over this and keep going.
Yeah. And then like I don't know, there's a whole bunch of questions I have. Yeah, that's I think there's others like the fact that like I buy that you hook a guy up to a machine in real life and you can share his dream, but when you start getting multiple levels deep and you're still using a dream version of that machine to do it and going into particular people's subconscious and that all tracks at some point like consciousness maps into a physical body, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of like I don't know that all particularly tracks, but I think that's just one of the leaps of faith, like the fact that you've got an intravenous machine that can link 8 people in a dream world. You have to accept. If you don't, then fuck you, this movie's not for you,
right?
But there's like I'm close to like what the fuck is actually, what does it mean when they hook up a dream machine to someone's corpse 3 levels deep into, you know, the James Bond level? What the hell does that even, what are you even doing? What are you interfacing with?
Yeah,
what kind of projection?
So you can't come at this as like a science fiction angle. I would almost call this like a fantasy film. It's not even, they never try to explain it. They don't extrapolate on existing technologies. There's none of that. It's just
I think Matrix
is the
did
rule.
There's a lot of that problems with the Matrix too. You know, like why does a fucking telephone line connect you? But they have like, you know, that this is actually, you know, it's not, none of this is real. It's but there are real elements, like these things map to some procedures and stuff in the Matrix, and like there are little holes that you can exploit, hard points they call them. But I wish they had like some kind of hard point hand wave where they could explain like why this is allowed, and then it would be the perfect airtight movie. But
and they never bothered to try to explain the dream machine, right?
Thank God, because like how does hooking up an IV machine, you know, put you in someone's subconscious?
I don't know. I don't know if Nolan has done like Kubrick, right? He would have gone 2 years researching this film, coming up with the edges of science to try and explain, okay, how could this happen? And maybe it doesn't make it into the film as an explanation, but it's in his head.
Yeah, and it would have reflected in
right. Did Nolan do that? I don't know. He was, you know, spinning this idea up in his head for 10 years. So I'm sure he has a lot of thoughts on that topic. Yeah. But you know, I don't need it in this movie. I really don't.
Yeah.
One of my questions, I guess, coming out of this movie is if you've got a totem and you know the weight and balance of it, would that totem not also appear to tell you were in the real world inside of your dream world?
I guess it's the idea that like it would behave differently in the dream world. But you're right.
But
like
why?
If you perfectly understand, because the dream world doesn't obey physics, but it mostly does. You know, so like, why would Mal's totem continually spin in a dream world? Obviously, it wouldn't in the fake world, the dream world, or the real world. But why would it spin in the? Why wouldn't it behave? You know, it's not like you drive a car and you put it in park or you put it in drive and it goes in reverse. You know, like all these dream, you pull the gun trigger and the bullet comes out the back of the gun. Like there's no other common everyday. In fact. Here, I'll do you one better. Goes connecting my issue. The dream machines work identically to the real life machines.
Right.
So it is a really cool idea of like, you know, how do you avoid a limbo situation? How do you, like, if you're being how do you know if you're in a dream or not? We have a totem thing and like you can't let anyone else touch it, because if you do, then a fucking architect will copy it, and you know. But yeah, the movie itself plays a little fast and loose with that.
And they also try to explain things like, I think, you know, Maul's totem is the one that Cobb picks up at some point. Like he picks it up on the hotel room floor. And I'm not sure if that's the totem he's using now or if they both had 2 nearly identical top totems. It seems to me like he's using her totem now, but what was he using during the dream world to indicate? Like when they went to limbo the first time, what was his totem?
I know there's a theory that like it was his wedding ring.
Okay.
But I don't know,
I've seen that. Like, every scene where he's wearing his wedding ring is a dream,
which is true. Which remains like, I think that's the best, some of the best evidence for the fact that you know, he's in a real world at the end of the movie. Because they're inconsistent in some things, but. The one thing you can hang your hat on is, yes, if he's in a dream, he's got his wedding ring on. If he's not in a dream, if he's in the real world, he's not wearing a wedding ring. And to defeat that, you have to essentially say the entire movie's a dream.
Yeah.
And I have seen a couple attempts to say that like, like some of the do you want to get, do you want to talk more about the plot? Because like, I also want, there's like, I got a lot to talk about as far as like whether it's a dream or not, and like other common interpretations and stuff like that. Where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, I got tons of questions. Like, an airplane, as your real world state, what happens if you kick out of three dream levels and a limbo level into an airplane that's experiencing massive turbulence? Like,
yeah, you get hit by a downdraft and the aircraft loses 5,000 feet in 10 seconds.
Right.
Like,
are you freaking out? Like, oh God, where are we?
Yeah, because like, again, Yosef would kick out, but he's the dream host of everybody else. So like, what the shit,
right.
know?
Especially Saito, who spent, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years in limbo. He kicks out and that plane is taking a nosedive and he's just losing his mind.
Yeah, for sure. What'd you think about? Did you recognize Elon Musk's ex-wife, Tallulah Riley?
I did. Yeah.
I've only seen her in two things, and both times she's cast as a pneumatic sex object.
Oh, you've seen her in some. You've seen her in shit. What's that?
Westworld, and this is the only thing I can think of.
No, it's the like 1800s romantic love story thing. Jane Austen.
Oh yeah,
maybe.
that movie. What?
It might be a Jane Austen thing.
Pride
and Prejudice.
Okay. Oh, really? She's in that?
Yeah. She's one of the daughters.
Okay. Well, most of the female protagonists also some level sex objects. I guess that's female protagonists up through still very recent history. But I was shocked to see, because like I didn't know her from Adam, obviously when I first saw this movie, and since Westworld, that's like, yeah, she's immediately recognizable.
Mm-hmm. The other person I was surprised to see in this is Dean, the dog shooter from The Leftovers.
Oh shit, you're right.
He's the customs agent.
He is. He's played a lot of like kind of FBI, CIA, police officer types. But yeah, that's I knew he looked familiar, and I wasn't sure exactly where he was from.
Yeah.
The bulk of our previous podcast on Blue Yonder 21 was you and I, who had seen the movie twice, trying to convince our former co-host Peter Street of the fact that the entire movie wasn't a dream, which I think he was an adherent of until our conversation. And it's funny because when I listened, all three of us had not a complete understanding. Like all three of us made a pretty serious factual error. I can't remember what yours was, but I know mine was I was denying that they hooked Sato up to a machine on the third level to get the limbo. I thought the only way you get the limbo is to die while sedated, but clearly they even suggest, like in the text of the film, that like the way Mal and Dom got to limbo was they just dreamed progressively deeper dream levels. So it does seem like they
went for all 7 layers and they just got lost.
Yeah, it does seem like that there is that possibility. That's an ever-present danger. The deeper you go, you might hit limbo.
Yeah, they talk about the unstable nature of it.
But I think that you and I both came across the idea that because the movie is constructed ambiguously. In fact, it's funny because when I got to the halfway point of this movie, I started questioning my own, like, oh my God, isn't it going to be ironic that like on my 5th time through this movie, I become like, it's all a dream believer? Because there is stuff that, the fact that Mal is using someone else's totem, the fact that he never sees his children's face, the fact that, there's the very bizarre conversation that he has with their grandmother, and like there's a whole bunch of things that kind of point in that direction. And then the final shot of the movie is the totem, the thing that Christopher Nolan has said most prominently, this is how you know what's real and what's not real. He spins it, and then he sees his children's face for the first time. And I think it's true to say that his character no longer cares if he's in a dream or reality.
100%. Him walking away from that totem is the point of that ending.
Yes. So he's at peace regardless, but us as an audience, our perspective pushes in and pushes in and pushes in on that seemingly impervious top. And then just as it begins to wobble, we cut away.
Yeah.
I still regret to inform you that on my 5th time through, I still think that it's pretty airtight that the movie that the movie does take place in the ending is real.
Yeah, and I fall into that camp too, but I think there's a lot of sort of wiggle room in the way the movie, in the language of the film. Like if you look at that ending, the ending feels like a fucking dream, right? He's got everything he wanted. He's dancing his way through customs. His father is there to greet him with his children who now turn around and show him his face. Like everything is going so perfectly for him. He's rid of Mal and this constant torture of the guilt of what he did. It just feels like a dream. And yet I really do think that like the end of this, you're not even supposed to really be asking that question. I think the bigger thing you're supposed to notice here is the emotional growth of the character.
Yeah, it's a very sly ending because you say it's like a dream, but on the other hand, it's explicitly what the movie said was going to happen. And it's like he's going to do this job. This guy who's powerful enough to buy an airline on a whim is going to pull some strings and get him through custom so he can go back and see his children. And there's a lot of things I think people falsely remember because like contemporaneously, I know a lot of people said, well, the children were the same age and they're wearing the identical clothes throughout the entire movie. This is indication it's a dream, that no time has passed. But Christopher Nolan himself said that's not true. The children that you don't see the faces of are actually different ages and are different actors. They are not wearing the same clothes, and he intended like the fact that like so why do you think Leonardo wouldn't look at his children's face? I think it's almost like a totem kind of thing that he didn't want to lose. He didn't want to start losing his grip on reality the way that he started losing his grip with his wife. Okay. You know, the fact that whether she's dead or not, the fact that he can't, like, he's going to have even more psychic projections. And you start to see that anyway, because they started creeping up in the hotel room or in the hotel lobby, various places in the dream. He started seeing his children too. But he wanted to, I don't know, there's almost like some like only he knew the reality of what his children looked like. And, you know, he didn't want to confuse that in any kind of dream state. But that, I think the best evidence, there's two lines of evidence. Number one, the presence of the wedding ring is very consistent, very, very, very consistent. And some people try to dismiss that as like, that's not actually a tell about whether he's dreaming or not. It's a tell about whether he has come to grips with his wife's, you know, death or not. But like, even in the scene where he's in limbo with Sato and he's done with all that, he's still wearing his wedding ring. And at the, you know, when he's going through customs and hugging his children, no wedding ring. But the other evidence is the presence or lack thereof of Mal. Okay. Like, she is in literally every dream sequence in the damn movie. She is never seen in what is quote unquote the real world. So I think those two. Well,
she's in the hotel scenes, which are flashbacks. Right?
Flashback, yeah. But never in like she's never in the real world in a time where she would supposed to be dead and is alive.
Gotcha.
So I think that that and the wedding ring are two kind of like ironclad, evidences that this is not a dream. Do you have any like evidence to the contrary? Because there's a whole bunch of other.
Not particularly. I feel like the kid stuff. There are two major points of regret in his life, I think. One is, kicking Ma out of the dream world in the way he did it, and it driving her insane and her killing herself. That's one. Two, I think, is when he makes the decision to flee and leave his kids behind. That's kind of one of the big drivers too, and of his guilt. And I think like at the end, he has both solved that problem because that's the one he can solve, right? And he's forgiven himself for the other.
Sure.
And ultimately, I like don't know if it matters if he's in a dream because that idea. Like I'm very open to the idea that you could live a perfectly great life in a dream world, and if you were never confronted with the idea that it wasn't a dream, there would be no difference effectively in living that life versus living a life in the real world. And I think Cobb buys into that too, right? Like at some point that's his constant battle. Like, is he going to give in to what the ideas that Mal had about the dream world being real and blur those lines to the point where he can no longer tell the difference? Or is he going to try to get back to the real world and stay there? At the end of the movie, I'm not sure that he cares, right? As he walks away from that spinning top totem, he's saying, I am happy. Like I've gotten to the place where whether this is the real world or a dream, this is what I want.
Hmm.
And I can be, maybe a father to dream kids. I don't know, but it, he's going to at least feel something more positive about himself and his life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great way to interpret it. Like, kind of like to your point, like, what does it matter if you're stuck in limbo, if you're with the woman you love, you have these godlike powers, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's a conscious choice to no longer be tormented by the question of whether it's real or not. Like, I've got my dad here, I got my presumably mom here, I got my children that love me. I don't need the goddamn top to tell me that this is what I need to be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, you go, like I said, it's like, if you believe it's all a dream, then you've got essentially Neo going back to the pod. But like I said, I think there's a lot of evidence. Some of the other contemporary theories that I thought were interesting that I don't think ultimately hold up, but there's arguments you can make, is there is interpretation that like this is actually, you're supposed to understand that Dom has been stuck in limbo and this is his wife Mal's attempts to get him back.
Okay.
Like she's actually trying to incept in him the idea that he's not real so he can wake up and be with him. The biggest problem with that theory is that like Mal doesn't seem to be getting him to do the things that he would need to do to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to understand that like Mal is like crystallized the idea of staying in the dream world so much that he's got things mixed up. Like actually death is what, puts you in the limbo instead of gets you out, because she's always saying, stay here with me. Not like, hey, let's blow each other's brains out. She only does that when she's in the quote unquote real world.
Right.
The other theory that I think is very interesting. In fact, I don't even know what disproves it. It's just like, is the fact that Dom has been stuck in limbo for years and years and years, and Ariadne is his grown daughter attempting to exfiltrate him. Wow. And this actually holds up a lot because, back, if you think about when he goes
and ultimately failing because she's then a child in his dream at the end of this movie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I can't remember exactly what falls apart, but the things that the evidence for that, other than the fact that her, someone he trusts, his father, is the one that suggests this person out of all the persons in the world to work with, and the fact that like when Mal sees her, she doesn't say like, who the hell is this? It's, why did you bring her here? What is she doing here? Almost as if she recognizes who Ariadne is and is offended that, Mal has, the Dom has brought, and, that would, possibly be if she recognizes her daughter in some aspect of that. But I thought that was a really interesting theory that was like, kind of popular at the time. And then, of course, we've already discussed the theory that this was just all a metaphor for getting, a project through Hollywood, and how fraught with danger and how you can lose yourself in the project. And you can lose what's track of what's real and what's important to you and all that kind of stuff. And, you look around at all the different people. But we said like that's where the artist, in this case Nolan, was using his experience as a working on a movie to inform like what it would be like to work on any other complicated project.
Yeah.
But I thought some of those alternate like kind of like understandings and stuff are interesting to play with, but ultimately not as satisfying and comprehensive as just what I think takes place on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all meant to be kind of being a sucker, being a sap when it comes to endings. I like positive endings. I like uplifting endings. I like the occasional downbeat ending for sure. But
yeah, sure,
the vast majority of films I see, I want some uplifting message, or a moment of hope or something like at the end of them. Like I want to feel good coming out of this movie. I don't think I'm alone in that. That's kind of what Hollywood's built on. So. Yeah, I see it as him getting out to the real world.
Did you think that Sato at the end, like there's a couple things I thought were funny on my, fifth or sixth watch of this thing, is like, imagine you're Robert Fisher and you wake up and you've been asleep for 10 hours and you're about to land and you look up and everyone in first class has got this supremely smug backslapping effect to them. Like, what the hell what did you guys do? Like, did I get a boner and you guys unzip my pants and Sharpie it? Like, why are you guys so smug? And it's all kind of vaguely directed at me or around me. Also, I think Leonardo DiCaprio crushed the feeling of a guy who might have been in limbo for longer than he wanted to in Sato's deal. Because, you know, we talked about this on the Dreamcast, is that I think they did a little light aging of DiCaprio to suggest that he might have spent a couple years down in Sato's limbo with him. But Sato did not seem like a man who, for the very first time ever, you know, as a tourist on this operation and who has not a lot of experience with like this kind of dream stuff, as a man who woke up and like, holy shit, I was an old ass man. I lived 50 years down in this place. What the fuck? It's like he immediately woke up and remembered, oh shit. I mean, imagine like if I asked you to do me a favor, right? Like, hey, Jim, before you log off today, could you take a look at that ad copy and forward it to so-and-so? And then you get in a coma for 50 fucking years. Except for it's not a coma. It's a coma where you're like in a Matrix thing where you're just living your entire life and you wake up in that and the first thing you do is like, shit, I got to fucking get to that email to A-Rod. Like, he wakes up, the first thing after going through all that and blowing his brains out as an old man is like, shit, I got to make this phone call before we were wheels down.
Oh yeah, no, it's wild. Actually, that's where I have like the biggest problem with this movie is when he comes to, how does Saito know that the plan succeeded?
Man,
to make that phone call, because all he gets is a glance from Cobb, right?
Yeah, and also the idea of like, how the hell do you like? Because people change their minds too. Like, you know, he has this profound dream experience, and he's resolving that, like, I'm going to dissolve the company, I'm going to do blah blah blah. But like,
how do you know the effects will linger long enough for it to actually happen?
Yeah, like it's not like he's going to land and like sign paperwork to dissolve the company, right?
Yeah.
Like he'd have to probably go through months of things, and then like it's like, you know, and is his uncle going to be like, are you out of your fucking mind? Like, what have all of his friends and associates have to say? Like, yeah, like even if Dom and his crew succeed, what does that even mean and look like? Mm-hmm. But I guess you're supposed to understand the idea that like if you incept something this well and this deep, it's like but that's interesting too, because also it's a pretty villainous act. They've swindled this guy out of his company. Mm-hmm. You know, this is just as immoral as like Godfather. Your signature's going on his contract or your brains are. Mm-hmm. You know, like this is Luca Brasi shit. It just happens all in the dreamscape.
And they've effectively also created, you know, cemented Saito as like a god among men in his industry, right?
Yeah, he's like Elon Musk in limbo level as far as his power levels. And I keep on thinking of like, you know, like Ocean's 11 works because the guy, Andy Garcia, is a shitbag.
Sure.
He's a bad guy. He's a gangster. He hurts people. He kills people. He does a lot of illegal stuff. So it's like, you know, you're stealing from a crook, a murderous crook at that. Cillian Murphy's very, very sympathetic in this movie.
I think so.
This poor guy has been abused and neglected by his dad, and, you know, trying to do what's right, and they go in there and mind fuck him, and, you know, I guess it's cool because Leonardo DiCaprio gets his kids back.
Right.
By doing the same thing that caused his wife to commit suicide, you know? Yeah. Like, the morality of the movie is a little. I need to be incepted onto like, you know, thinking that Dom is a good guy here. Yeah. But you know, I don't know. You're not supposed to feel sorry for Cillian Murphy.
No, I mean he's not the protagonist, right? Or at least not the main protagonist.
He's really good at playing haunted and wounded, though.
Oh yeah. I mean, I kept waiting for him to turn into Scarecrow, and every time they put a bag over his head, I'm like, oh, this is the moment, right? Like they drip oils on his bag, and I'm like, okay, he's a Scarecrow now.
Yeah, because he's already wearing a Scarecrow. He's like a slightly deluxe, you know, major brand version of the Scarecrow mask. It looks like a very nice mask. He's not a burlap bag, but yeah, he's gonna come out of there in Batman mode. What else we got to say about this?
I don't have a lot more to say about this movie that I haven't already said in the previous Inception Dreamcast that we did. If you want to hear about the plot minutia, and you know how all these things line up exactly and the levels and stuff, go listen to that one because I think it still holds up. But yeah, I came away from this movie appreciating it on a much more meta level. Like, look at the construction of this thing. It's mind-boggling to keep everything straight and tie everything so perfectly together, both on an emotional and plot level. Christopher Nolan's a master.
And this movie's like what, an hour and a half, maybe an hour or two and a half, 2 hours 40 minutes. But I challenge you to take a minute out of it.
Yeah, no, it's streamlined.
Like as stuffed as it is, this is actually a Jenga board that's had almost all of the pieces that you can safely remove from it, because you know, and it's funny because like I think it's a universal experience the first time you watch it that you don't really get 100% of it, because I think it is like, you know, he could have used a few more of those Jenga blocks putting back on the bottom and maybe belabored some of these concepts, but he told you everything you need to know to understand what's going on an intuitive level, and then you can fill those gaps in if you like it and you want to rewatch. It makes it more rewarding. But like, yeah, it's an incredibly tight film, I think, and it's funny because like this is I love Dan Harmon. Dan Harmon loves to bitch about this movie, not never in any kind of specifics.
Okay,
more of just like, oh, look at this asshole, takes an hour to explain how his movie works before he can get around to executing the plot of it.
But that's why it works so well.
Just making shit up and all that stuff is, but
he's defining the rules. He's defining the parameters, and then he's working within those in really interesting ways. I don't know. It works for me.
Yeah, no, it works for me too. I'd say it's just naked jealousy, except for like, you know, Dan does also respect other, like he's like super in love with like was it Skylar Brothers that did the Stranger Things? It's not Skylar.
Duffer Brothers, yeah.
Duffer Brothers. Well, that'll about wrap us up for Inception this week. Well, I guess if you still want another hour and a half of discussion, I will link the direct link to Blue Yonder number 21 if you want to hear three guys 10 years ago, you know, a bunch of idiots talking about Inception for another hour and a half. It's there for you. If you want the full 3-hour bald move Inception experience for the 10th anniversary, and who the hell wouldn't, honestly. Next week, we have another anniversary. It's the 25th anniversary of Kevin Costner's Waterworld.
Oh, fuck yeah.
A movie that seemed much more ridiculous 25 years ago than it does in 2020.
Yeah.
I've only seen that movie once. I'm excited to see how it's aged. And I'm looking forward to it. It's probably going to be a ridiculous thing. But there you go. We'll be watching Waterworld next week. If you want to join us, check it out on your favorite streaming site, rent it on Amazon, pull it off your Blu-ray. I'm sure everyone's got the Criterion version at home. Mm-hmm. Pop it in your Laserdisc, and really geek out on it. That's what we're doing next week. Until then, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jim.
See ya.